Happy Halloween everyone, Soberoni of G&A Reviews here with a servant spotlight for the fluffy fox herself, Tamamo. We'll be examining her stats and her skills, as well as going over pointers on how to utilize her effectively, and an overall grade comparing her to how she stacks up to the other 5-star servants. I also have another spotlight video up today for the other new Halloween servant, Caster Liz, so please be sure to check that out after this video. Now, on to Tamamo's stats. Tamamo's max HP of 14,259 actually ties with waivers and another notable unreleased caster as the second highest among all 5-star casters, which also means she has one of the highest HP stats in the game among all 5 stars. Although, as expected of a caster, her attack of 10,546 puts her near the very bottom among all 5-star servants, with even some 4 stars having higher attack, and only one other 5-star caster having lower attack. Moving on to her skills. Her first skill is Curse Rank X, which has between an 80 to 100% chance of decreasing the enemy's Noble Phantasm charge by 1, depending on level. Her second skill is Morph Rank A, which increases her defense for 1 turn by 30%, and then increases her defense again for 3 turns between 10 to 30% depending on level. Her final skill is Fox Wedding Rank X, which increases the arts card effectiveness of an ally for between 30 to 50% for 3 turns depending on level, and that is strengthened through an interlude which adds a healing effect that restores between 1,000 to 2,500 HP to the targeted ally depending on level. Her passive skills are Territory Creation Rank C, which increases her arts card effectiveness by 6%, and Divinity Rank A, which applies damage plus 200. Moving on to her deck, Tamamo has a full-on arts deck. It's Quick Arts Buster with an Arts Noble Phantasm. Her Noble Phantasm targets all allies and decreases the cooldown on all their skills by 1. It also restores between 1,000 to 2,000 HP depending on level, and increases their Noble Phantasm gauge by between 25 to 50% depending on overcharge. This Noble Phantasm can be powered up through an interlude which increases the heal from between 1,000 to 2,000 to 2,000 to 3,000 depending on level. Taking a closer look at her cards, we see that Tamamo's Quick card has 3 hits, her Arch card has 5 hits, her Buster has 1 hit, and her Extra has 4 hits. Her Noble Phantasm gain on attacks is 0.32%, which is actually very low. However, it's offset by her very high hit counts, and her star rate is 11%, which is actually pretty high. And what this essentially means is that because she has multiple hits per card, her Noble Phantasm gain is slightly lower. However, due to the fact that she has a full arts deck, her Noble Phantasm gain is still very good compared to most servants. And surprisingly enough, even though she's a caster, she does have a decent star generating ability, simply because she has a high star rate and a lot of hits on her Quick and Arts cards. Now, let's get this out of the way. Tamamo is a great servant. The only question is, how great? Starting off with her skills, it might not be immediately apparent, but her kit is incredible. Curse has a very high success rate. It isn't perfect, but a 100% chance is very good even when you factor in debuff resist, and unless your opponent is stacking debuff resist, you should land this nearly every time. Stealing a charge from your enemy's Noble Phantasm is actually extremely useful. Consider that a number of enemy bosses have a very short Noble Phantasm charge gauge. Gil, for example, can Noble Phantasm every 3 turns, and he has a skill that adds a charge to his Noble Phantasm gauge. So being able to stall out and, more importantly, control your opponents and when they use their Noble Phantasm is one of the most important things to do in the late game. Never underestimate this skill, it will save you a lot. Morph is another fairly useful skill, though it's not as good as Curse or Fox Wedding. It can come in handy, and having a 60% defense buff will make the difference between surviving an enemy crit or even a Noble Phantasm. The little bit of tankiness that this skill gives her works wonders for Tamamo when you complement it with her Noble Phantasm, and it actually makes her a pretty viable tank. Finally, her best skill is Fox Wedding, and it's one of the strongest buffs in the game. A 50% targetable arts buff for 3 turns is the best possible support skill in an arts team, and it's a major reason why Tamamo is so necessary even if you already have Waver. She's the glue that holds arts teams together. Post-interlude, Fox Wedding gets a strong heal and goes from being a great skill to one of the top 10 best skills in the game. From healing to a massive arts buff, this skill just gives you everything an arts team needs, and it's only on a 5-turn cooldown, which isn't really a 5-turn cooldown, but we'll get into that. You should prioritize leveling Fox Wedding above anything else, and then you can go for Morph or Curse next. It doesn't really matter since both skills are still fairly strong even at level 1. But personally, I do recommend leveling Curse over Morph, since 20% success chance in debuffing between level 1 and 10 is pretty significant. But despite her amazing skills, Tamamo's bread and butter is her Noble Phantasm. Her Noble Phantasm not only restores HP to all allies, but it refills the entire party's Noble Phantasm gauge up to 50%, and it lowers everyone's skills cooldown by 1. This is one of the best Noble Phantasms in the game, hands down. This Noble Phantasm is what enables all other servants to Noble Phantasm spam at unrealistic levels. It really is possible to just have a team Noble Phantasm every other turn using this. In fact, in the video playing, take account of how many times Noble Phantasms go off in one battle. You can use the Noble Phantasm and then have 50% Noble Phantasm gauge immediately after, and then get an Arch Chain to get it back to 100% on your next turn, and then rinse and repeat. The skill cooldown is ridiculous because it basically means that all your skills, including Fox Wedding, are now more on a 3 to 4 turn cooldown instead of a 5 turn cooldown. And you can shave 1 to 2 turns off the cooldown on the skills for the rest of your team, since this Noble Phantasm pretty much just enables skill spamming. And I can go on about all the different strategies that this one Noble Phantasm can enable, but I'm just going to be brief. It's one of the best in the game, and it downright breaks it as far as I'm concerned. The only downsides to Tamamo are her low attack and the fact that her Noble Phantasm gain isn't as high as Waver's or most other casters with full art stacks. But low damage is kind of to be expected since she's a support caster and it's completely irrelevant to what she does. And her Noble Phantasm gain is still pretty strong even though it's weaker than Waver's, so she has absolutely no problem spamming her Noble Phantasm. And when it comes to team comp, Tamamo's pretty much the new Waver and Hans. She fits in pretty much any team. However, she does excel in arts teams, so her best use is when she's supporting offensive arts servants like Vlad, Media, Robin Hood, Uriel, and Nero. In fact, her synergy with Vlad is so ridiculously good that she actually elevates him to a top tier berserker, since she makes up for all of his weaknesses by allowing him to not only spam his skills in Noble Phantasm, but also providing him constant healing and an insane buff that can put his damage on par with other berserkers. Seriously, Tamamo and Vlad is like one of the best combo pairs you can have in the game. Aside from supporting offensive art servants, she's a fantastic staller, so just pair her with Media Lily, Marie, Ku, Ruler, George, basically anyone who's good at stalling, and you'll just never die. Imagine having Ku's evade skill on a 3 to 4 turn cooldown. And despite being a support herself, she doesn't overlap with Waver. In fact, she's one of Waver's best support pairs. And that's because Waver relies heavily on his skills, and Tamamo decreases his skills cooldown by 1. And she provides healing in droves, which is the one thing that Waver lacks in his kit. So they do make a dynamite pair together. So don't think that just because you have Waver, you can't use Tamamo. They actually work extraordinarily well together. In terms of craft essence, her Bond craft essence is Tamamo Club. It increases the art effectiveness of everyone on the field by 15%, and it's a fantastic craft essence for her, especially if you use her in an arts team. It increases her damage and Noble Phantasm charge, but more importantly, it supplements her role as a support buffer, and it effectively turns Fox Wedding from a 50% buff into a 65% buff, and that's just a little broken. If you don't have her Bond craft essence, then your major focus should probably be on increasing her Noble Phantasm gain to further enable her Noble Phantasm spam. So make sure to use Formal Craft, Prisma Cosmos, or Divine Banquet. If you have a limit broken formal craft, I do recommend using that over the other two. Otherwise, you can go with Divine Banquet or Prisma Cosmos. And you can use Maiden Halloween as well, but remember that it only applies to healing received, not healing done. In other words, it'll only increase Tamamo's healing on herself, not others, so it might be worth it if you just want to stall. In the same vein, you can also use Moon Goddess's Bath if you have it. Overall, Tamamo is one of the best supports in the game. Her Noble Phantasm breaks the game by allowing skill spamming and Noble Phantasm spamming by your entire party. She single-handedly makes offensive arts teams not only viable, but powerful. I can't even imagine running an offensive arts team effectively in the late game without a Tamamo on the team. She simply does too much. A ton of healing, a strong buff, Noble Phantasm charge for the entire party, skill cooldowns for the entire party, and enemy Noble Phantasm control, so you can't really ask for much more. I'm honestly struggling to find any downsides to her, so you all knew this was coming. Tamamo gets an S rank from me and joins Waver as one of the most OP servants in the game. If you have Waver, still roll for Tamamo, unless you are hard set on saving for Okita or Mordred or Jack. I highly recommend rolling this Halloween gacha for Tamamo. Thankfully, Tamamo is not limited and will rejoin after the London chapter, but now is the absolute best time to roll her. And those are my thoughts on Tamamo. There have been a lot of questions on how good she is or what she can do, so if you have any questions about her or anything to say at all, or you plan on rolling for her, let me know in the comments. And please check out that caster Liz spotlight also up on the channel today, link in the description. And don't forget to leave a like if you enjoyed the video, and consider subscribing if you really enjoyed the video. And I'll see you guys in the next spotlight. Later.